Things couldn't possibly get worse for Pete Hegseth. This has to be his rock bottom. There is no way it can possibly get lower, is what I was thinking a couple of hours ago before a news story broke about Pete Hegseth. The man embroiled in so many scandals that somehow there are more of them than there are drinks that he consumes on a daily basis. Hegseth just had a new story released about what's happening, chaos at the Pentagon, and it really shows and makes clear where Pete's head is at. And it's not doing his job. And we are going to get into all of that. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video. And if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way. And it really does mean a lot to me. Now, before we get into this humiliating story for Pete Hegseth, I want to hear from a MAGA Republican who somehow, some way, tried to defend him and really failed at it. It was Byron Donalds in this clip right here.
And so Pete Hegseth is trying to reorganize DOD and get it up to snuff, because let's not sit here and act like DOD was doing a bang-up job under the previous administration. Number two, nobody was saying a word when Lloyd Austin, the previous defense secretary, disappeared for a month. Nobody could find him. But you want to talk about nobody could get a memo signed by the chief of staff for 3 weeks?
Hold on, Byron.
This is not even the same type of story. This is not even the same
fair
type
to
of story.
say
Let's
nobody is
honest.
saying a word. So you think that the defense secretary, the former defense secretary under Biden, going to the hospital for treatment, not telling the president, admitting that he did not tell the president, although there was someone that was heading at the time, is an equal thing to somebody who is giving out information to his wife, who does not have a security clearance, to his lawyer, to his brother, on a personal cell phone on a Signal chat, which he's already been, looked at for doing that with a whole bunch of folks from the administration. You're equating those two things. You think those are the same things, and you're okay with Pete Hegseth and what he did, but not okay with what Lloyd Austin did?
I'm not equating those two things. I think that Secretary Austin not being around, not even tell. Well, let me finish my statement. I'm not equating them. I'm saying that when Secretary Austin was not around, he was in the hospital. I'm glad that he's better. I'm glad he's healthy, but he disappeared. The president at the time did not know where he was. Nobody knew where he was. That is significantly worse than the situation that you're talking about, especially when we're actually having a conversation about an allegation against Secretary Hegseth and ignoring the job happening at DOD right now, where recruitment is up amongst our fighting forces. Morale is up amongst our fighting forces. That's what we should be focused on, not new allegations because CNN and other news media want something to talk about.
Right, but some of these are not allegations. Some of these are coming from his own former press secretary. Some of these are coming because we saw the chats already with his, with the leadership on Signal. So we saw that he uses Signal and inappropriately uses it. So I guess the question to you is, you sound like you're putting these two things together and that you see them as the same. But I want to understand if you are okay with him using Signal to talk about war plans, to talk about the attack as it's happening, both with his circle and a reporter who was added on to that chat, mind you, and with his own family members. Are you okay with that?
Are we going to talk about the Signal chat from chat number one with White House officials when
Both.
it's already clear that they were not talking about classified information?
Don't forget that there was an Atlantic reporter on there.
Hold on. The key classified information was actually held in the classified server system that is used by White House officials. Are we going to talk about that or a different conversation? Look, let's be clear. Pete Hegseth has done his job as Secretary of Defense right now.
So I had to start with that clip because Byron Donalds is making the same argument that the rest of the White House has, that we shouldn't get upset with Pete Hegseth. These stories are nonsense. They're disgruntled employees who are mad that Pete Hegseth, he's actually doing the work. He's locked in. We're not doing any more of that DEI, that Biden woke razzmatazz at the Defense Department. We're focused now at the Pentagon. Well, what is Pete Hegseth actually focused on? Makeup. The man is focused on makeup. Yeah, and we're going to check it out in this story right here. Pete Hegseth has makeup studio installed at the Pentagon. Once a television host, always a television host. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth spent thousands of dollars to turn a Pentagon room into a makeup studio earlier this year, according to CBS News. He made the seemingly costly renovation to the green room immediately next to the Pentagon press briefing room while enacting deep cuts to department programs and staff, part of the Trump administration's effort to root out wasteful spending. One source said that the room was originally sparsely furnished with a table, chairs, a mirror on the back of the door, a TV, and photos of former defense secretaries on the wall. An in-house construction crew then came in and removed everything, replacing the previous furniture with a new director's chair and a large mirror with makeup, lights, another source said. The improvements, which reportedly cost thousands of dollars, came at a time when the administration was looking to cut costs, resulting in thousands of federal workers losing their jobs and major budget cuts across many programs and departments. Hegseth himself has played an important role in these cuts, signing a memo in March titled Continuing Elimination of Wasteful Spending at the Department of Defense, which terminated over $580 million in wasteful spending on the department contracts and grants. The upgraded green room will only be available to senior leaders and VIPs to use before press calls or TV appearances. At this point, I don't even know what to say. Cuts to the VA, but let's make sure Pete's nice and powdered up before he goes on his drunk ramblings on the morning news. It's ridiculous. It would be funny if it wasn't so sad that this is their focus, that this is the embarrassment who is heading up the Pentagon. I think Pete Hegseth is pretty impressive for how much he has been able to spotlight how bad he is at this job. It's like Trump's cabinet nominees were the worst in history. So for Pete to be standing out means he's pretty special. This is impressive stuff for Pete. And Mikey Sherrill was calling out how impressively bad it was in this clip right here.
And let me begin with what would have happened to you if you had shared battle plans, attack plans like this when you were a pilot?
Well, Lawrence, like everyone else, except Pete Hegseth, evidently, I would have been court-martialed and drummed out of the military. This is absolutely ridiculous. And, you know, there's two things that are problematic here in my mind. One is the complete incompetence that Pete Hegseth has shown and continues to show. And we're seeing all the reporting coming out of the DOD right now. But the second piece that's so concerning is this complete lack of accountability. In the military, we inculcate this sense of accountability and responsibility because you're responsible for people's lives. In fact, when you're a plebe at the Naval Academy, you learn the 5 basic responses, one of which is no excuse, sir. This sense that you have to take responsibility for your actions. And what we see here again and again and again is Pete Hegseth trying to avoid any sense of accountability, but he should be fired, so he needs to man up and actually resign right now because he can no longer protect our national security.
How does this man still have a job? Anyone have an answer on that? I know it's Donald Trump. I know it's MAGA. They refuse to take accountability, but we cannot let this story get swept up under the rug. We cannot let, Pete Hegseth cover it up with some mixer so that he can quietly sip his gin with his soda. To use a reference that if Pete is watching, he might understand. We need to make sure that we are hammering this every day. People are in danger every second that he is in charge. And that chaos is real. And Jason Crow, someone that we've had on the show a couple times, called it out right here.
I spent my life in service to this country. I deployed 3 times to combat in service to this nation. I learned in that time in service that responsibility is core to leadership. You accept responsibility when things go wrong. You admit mistakes. You set the standard from the very top. It is completely outrageous to me that administration officials come before us today with impunity, no acceptance of responsibility, excuse after excuse after excuse, while we send our men and women downrange to do incredibly difficult, incredibly dangerous things on our behalf. And yet, nobody is willing to come to us and say this was wrong. This was a breach of security and we won't do it again. It is outrageous and it is a leadership failure, and that's why Secretary Hegseth, who undoubtedly transmitted classified, sensitive operational information via this chain, must resign immediately. There can be no fixes, there can be no corrections until there is accountability, and I'm calling on the administration to move forward with accountability. I yield back.
If this was anyone else but Pete Hegseth, they would be fired, which is interesting considering the whole Trump administration was supposed to be about a meritocracy, that there was no DEI, there were no special favors, it was only the best of the best. But this guy who said that there's going to be a learning curve somehow at the Pentagon, so clearly not the best of the best, is allowed to keep his job. It doesn't make any sense. But that's the chaos of the administration, right? And Republicans want to chalk this all up to just being, you know, it's Trump, you know, maybe it's hectic, maybe the libs are upset, they're overplaying it, but we're not. The chaos seeps in and it's damaging, deeply damaging. Markets react to the instability at the Pentagon because Pete Hegseth is such a buffoon. And Tim Walz spoke to that chaos in what I thought was a really apt takedown right here.
And on an hour-by-hour, day-by-day basis, the President of the United States has chosen to throw our economy into turmoil. Global markets are teetering on the brink of collapse. Businesses across this country and here in Minnesota are already laying off employees by the thousands. Working people are paying more for basic goods, and if you haven't checked your 401k lately, don't do it. So let's be very clear. None of this had to happen. When the president took office 3 months ago, there was no reason to throw a wrench in the works and destroy decades of work. But if you listen to anything that comes out of his mouth, one thing has become clear. He's just plain confused about how the world really works for working people. We're talking about a guy that slapped a 10% tariff on an island populated only by penguins. It'd be funny as hell if it wasn't true and stupid. It makes no sense to anyone. That isn't servant leadership. It's not any kind of leadership. It's small, it's weak, and it's petty. It takes the awesome power of the federal government and turns it into a crude weapon, wielded by a man who wants to be king. As governor, I will continue to do everything in my power to protect Minnesotans from getting hurt and continue to provide shelter from the storm for Minnesotans.
The reason why America is so quickly losing its standing around the globe isn't just because we are severing relationships, whether it be with our allies in Ukraine, Canada, Mexico, because of tariffs alone. It's also just because we're viewed as unstable. It is chaotic. Pete Hegseth contributes to that. That hurts us all. When America is not a sound investment, it gets more difficult to invest in America. That means the price to pay off your credit card, the interest payments, that goes up. It's more difficult to get a house, to get a car. Because of instability, these things matter, and we have to start talking about them like that. We're going to on this show every single day, and if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.